So I'm the Senior Regional Advisor of Flora at Council, so basically the botanist for Council, but only been in this role a little while, and prior to that I was at the Auckland Botanic Gardens for almost 9 years running this Agapanthus trial. So I'm going to give you a little bit of background on Agapanthus, although many of you have probably spent many laboured hours, remote's not working, weeding out Agapanthus in your home gardens or in your local bush. It's a terrible weed. It really invades kind of every habitat, to be honest. Really dense infestations. It's really spreading throughout the country, so it's not really just a problem in Auckland, Coromandel, even down Christchurch, Lincoln Way. It's starting to really take a hold. Lots of seed spreading from those capsules, and obviously if you've dug it out before and you leave a little bit behind, it sure is going to pop back up. So spreads vegetatively as well. So back a few years ago when we had the Regional Pest Management Strategy, the RPMS, there was a research category for weed plants, pest plants, and in that category Agapanthus fell, and that gave Auckland Council a bit of a commitment to do research and explore options about what we could do in terms of minimising Agapanthus as a problem in natural habitats. So in 2012, an Agapanthus working group was established. This was comprised of a couple of parts of council, so the biosecurity team at the time, Auckland Botanic Gardens, and then some external partners, so Plant and Food Research, Manaaki Whenua Landcare, the New Zealand Plant Producers Incorporated, or NZPPI, and some of our production industry members. And this working group looked at what can we do to prevent Agapanthus being a problem. Obviously, removing it is challenging, but also people are planting lots and lots of different cultivars in their home gardens, and many of these are producing lots of seeds equally as these wild forms in the wild. So lots of parts of the community, their livelihoods depended on this. You know, they were growing and selling Agapanthus, and that's a challenge for them, and listing Agapanthus as a weed would have a negative impact on them. And so we wanted to bridge the gap between the kind of horticultural world and the biosecurity world, and that's where the Botanic Gardens kind of came in to facilitate that relationship. The group had lots of conversation about what is a sterile Agapanthus. Can we find anything that has really low fertility or almost no fertility? Is that even possible in the different cultivars that are available on the market? So lots of hot debate on that. And in the Regional Pest Management Plan, the RPMP, which many of you will be really familiar with, the conditions on Agapanthus were that all Agapanthus praecox and the cultivars will be banned from sale, distribution, display, etc. However, there was one caveat on that, and that was that any cultivars that pass a trial that have less than 2% viable seeds being produced would be able to be sold and planted. So that is where the Botanic Gardens trial came into effect, was can we action that and find, do we have any cultivars that meet that 2% fertile seed? So here we go, we set up a trial at the gardens. As you can imagine, there's lots and lots of cultivars of Agapanthus available, and sometimes we're a bit limited on how much space we can do trials, so we kind of do them in batches. So the first set of trial plants went in. What did we need to do first was really establish a really clear methodology about how we were going to test this. If you're super into data and calculations, this is the report to have a look at. So Manaaki Whenua did lots of analysis of different techniques and types of data that we could collect and capture and analyse, and that would produce some interesting stats that I'll talk about later. So here's a bit of the trial. If you've never been to the Botanic Gardens and walked around the trial gardens, this is what it looks like. And what do we do in the trial? Here's my home drawing. I'm not really an artist, but this is how I explain it to some of our summer students and the trial gardeners on what data we're actually collecting. So when we've got our trial, we've got about 20 or so cultivars in that trial at any given time. We want to know how many plants of each cultivar we've got. That's usually pretty easy, there's 3. Then we count the number of stems that each plant produces. And then on that stem, how many fruit stalks or peduncles there are. So that's kind of what the spiky looking hedgehog looks like. And then we collect all the capsules off that head, and we spend hours sometimes opening those capsules and sorting out the seeds, and we count the ones that are black. So those are the ones that are fertile seeds, and we discard the ones that are white or the kind of a milky brown colour. And then the last piece of data we collect is how many seeds could this plant produce. So we're looking at kind of the extreme end of this plant's ability to produce seed and be a problem. So we count all the ovules per capsule. Now, not every ovule produces a seed in many of the cultivars that we trial, but its ability to potentially produce seed is what we want to look at. And I coordinate all that data collection. We have a site at Botanic Gardens here in Auckland, but we also use our Botanic Gardens network across New Zealand and have additional sites down in Taranaki at Pukakura Park and one down at Christchurch Botanic Gardens. They collect the same data that we collect here in Auckland, kind of gives us some environmental and conditions to replicate this research. And we plug this data into this really crazy looking formula. I don't do it, someone else does it for me. And what that does is tells us, do these plants produce less than 2% viable seed? And you might be wondering, why 2%? If a plant is sterile, shouldn't it be 0? That's a great question, and lots of debate on that. But what we decided to follow was kind of a regulatory precedent that was started in the state of Oregon for buddleias, which are also a little bit problematic here in Auckland. So we're kind of following some well-established research elsewhere in the world. So that report that I showed earlier goes into lots of detail about how that formula works and how we got there, but that's just in a little bit of an overview. So those plants go through the trial. If they hit over that threshold, so if they produce more than 2% viable seed, they're out. And if they hit under that, then they are listed formally on the Auckland Botanic Gardens website as per the RPMP. Now, sometimes these plants, they tend to be in the trial for about 4 years. They're there for a year to grow up to maturity. They're pretty fast-growing plants. Then they have 3 years where we're collecting this data. Sometimes we might see anomalies in that data, and if we do, we collect additional data for another year to make sure we're producing really robust trial results. And these are the cultivars that have passed so far. So this is almost a decade of work to date. There's 11 of them there, and these are the ones that technically under the RPMP, people can grow, distribute, sell, and then plant at home. If you're interested in what they look like, you might not be Agapanthus fans, personally not, but the interesting thing and the reason why I wanted to show you some of the ones that have passed the trial is that they don't really look very much like that Agapanthus praecox that you tend to be digging out. Agapanthus praecox is quite big, it's got very tall flowers. These ones tend to be very small dwarf ones, they have variegated foliage. They might have white flowers or light blue flowers. So they're kind of very variable, and that's kind of up to your own preference as to what you might like to grow at home. But kind of taking my biosecurity hat off, so we've said these 11 are okay to grow. They won't become a problem in the wild because we've collected at least that set, almost a decade worth of data for. So I put on my horticultural hat and I say, actually, are any of these nice garden plants? Because that's what the Botanic Gardens do in terms of trialling plants for Auckland. They go, we're going to trial this group of plants and look at, do they do well? Do they get any pest and disease? Do they flower for a really long time? Do they have a nice habit and form? Because those are the types of things that you actually want in your home garden. So we put those 11 plants through that criteria, and actually only a few of them really sit through that Auckland Botanic Gardens lens of a good garden plant. So if you're interested in that kind of information, the Botanic Gardens have a database called Plants for Auckland on their website, and all plants that go through their trial process is there as recommendations for the ones that have kind of passed their criteria. So it's a good place to go if you're an Agapanthus lover and you want something that will look beautiful and kind of aesthetically pleasing in your home garden. That's the place to go. So what's next for this trial? So I kind of alluded to the fact that there's a lot more cultivars available on the market than have gone through this trial, so it hasn't ended. It's a rolling trial. We're always adding more and more cultivars into the trial. There's been 2 kind of batches to date, and about mid last year we planted an additional 15 cultivars. So you can see we're continually adding new plants, removing those that have done their time in the trial. So I've talked about there's a minimum period, so they're in there for at least 3 years in terms of data collection. They've had a year of establishment as well. And right now we're analysing the data from the previous summer. So updates to that list that's published on the Auckland Botanic Gardens website should be available by the middle of this year. So if you are interested in more about this work, you can check out the Botanic Gardens website. You can also have a peruse of the RPMP if you haven't already. And you can also check out the Te Aki Tamaki Makoto website, which is where we provide kind of environmental information about controlling pest plants, pest animals, and that's a great hub for kind of conservation information.